Hello students, myself is Puneet from Prab classes. Our today's topic is what is private or public sector. In our day-to-day life, we come across all kinds of business organizations, small or large, industrial or service-oriented, privately owned or government-owned. These organizations affect our daily economic life. The Government of India has opted for a mixed economy in which both private and government entities are allowed to operate. In this course, we will concentrate on the private sector and public sector in general with particular reference to India. In this course, we will discuss number 1, what is the private sector? Number 2, then we will understand what is meaning of public sector. What are the various types of public sector? Next, what is the importance of public sector? After that, we will discuss how the role of public sector has changed over time. Next, what are the various challenges faced by the public sector? We will understand from where the public sector gets fund. There are some misconceptions about public sector. We will throw light on those misapprehensions. Next, what steps can be taken to improve public sector? Next, what is the difference between private sector and public sector? The topic before us is private sector. We come across various types of business organizations in our daily life. In our neighborhood market, there are shops which are owned by sole proprietors or big retail organizations run by a company. We also come across people who come together to form a partnership firm and provide us services like legal services, medical services. Similarly, there are certain offices or business which are owned by the government. For example, Railways is an organization wholly owned and managed by the government. The post offices are owned by the Post and Telegraph Department, Government of India. As a large number of private courier companies have come into existence in recent years, our dependence on government-run post offices for their postal services has greatly reduced in cities and towns. Then there are businesses which operate in more than one country which are known as global enterprises. So all types of business organizations are operating in the country whether they are private, public or global. Now we will find the answer to the question, what is the private sector? Private sector includes those companies, enterprises or businesses that are owned, controlled and managed by private individuals or private companies. In this picture, you will find the names of a few companies such as Reliance Industries, HDFC Bank, ITC Limited and Tata Consultancy Services, which fall in the category of private sector. Generally, private enterprises offer maximum employment in an economy. The private entities may be small, medium-sized or even large corporates. Here, the private companies can get funds. The private entities can raise funds from individuals, groups and the general public. Now, why private entities are established? These companies are formed to generate significant profit from business and compound investors' wealth faster. What private companies do to face competition? These companies usually focus on customer needs in an attempt to survive in the market in the long run. This picture shows that the various forms of business organizations in the private sector are sole proprietorship, joint Hindu family business, partnership firm, cooperative society, company and multinational corporations. We have already uploaded courses on sole proprietorship, joint Hindu family business, partnership firm, cooperative society, and joint stock company. You can also view our courses on time management tips, how to manage stress in our life, and crop production and management on our own website and other sites. Now we will discuss what is the meaning of public sector, what are the various types of public sector, and what is the importance of public sector. Firstly, we will understand the meaning of public sector. Public sector consists of the organizations that are owned, controlled, and managed by government or government bodies. These organizations may either be partly or wholly owned by the central or state government. In either case, the government holds a majority stake and has its say in every decision regarding running the entity. Some of them can be non-profit organizations while others participate in commercial activities as well. There are public sector organizations. First type of public sector organizations are those who are wholly funded by the government by collecting taxes, charges and fees. The other type of public sector organizations are those who are partially funded by the government by holding more than 51% of the total share capital. The main aim of public sector is to ensure the welfare of the general public and providing goods and services public at relatively cheaper rates than their private counterparts. Now topic before us is what is the importance of public sector. Public sector has played a key role in achieving systematic and planned development in a developing country like India. Let us understand the important role the public sector has played. Number 1. Development of infrastructure. In the early years of independence, public sector stepped into areas of basic and heavy industries such as engineering, iron and steel, power plants, etc., as the private sector was not having financial muscle or other means. Public sector invested huge capital in areas such as road, rail and air transport. This all leads to the development of infrastructure in the country as a whole. The second point which highlights the importance of public sector is its contribution to the central exchequer. Public sector is contributing a good amount to the central exchequer in the dividend, GST and corporate taxes, etc. The next point pertains to regional balance. Earlier, industrial development in India was very much centered around big port cities like Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai, as the private sector established units at those places which were suitable to them. Public sector set up various industrial units and factories in the states like Bihar, Orissa and MP to provide employment to the people, economic development of those areas and remove regional disparities. Fourth importance of public sector pertains to import substitution. Some public sector enterprises played a great role in achieving import substitution and thus saving precious foreign exchange of the country. For example, Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, Bharat Electronics Limited, Steel Authority of India Limited. Fifth point is check over concentration of economic power. Public sector is able to set up large industries and the income and the benefits that accrue are shared by a large number of employees and also the general public. Public sector prevents concentration of wealth and economic power in the hands of very few industrial houses. No one can deny that public sector has played a major role in nation building. The performance of public sector units cannot be judged in terms of criteria used to judge the performance of private sector enterprises, as the main aim of public sector is welfare maximization and not profit maximization. Now we will understand how the role of public sector has changed over time, from where the funds accrue to the public sector, and what are the various challenges faced by the public sector. Changing role of public sector or government policy towards the public sector since 1991. Public sector has played a major role in the overall development of the economy of the country. It helped in removing regional imbalance, development of infrastructure in remote areas and townships. They did a great job in providing employment to lakhs of people. With the economic liberalization in 1991, its role is changed to take on competition. Now there has been a shift towards privatization and outsourcing of public services. This has led to the decrease in the size of public sector and increase in the number of private organizations who provide services that were previously considered to be the part of the public domain. Due to modernization of the public sector as well as to improve their efficiency, there has been reduction in jobs. SAIL, for example, which employed 2 lakhs workers at one time in the past, now employs about 6,000 workers. But even today, it has more staff as compared to Tata Steel, which has 36,000 workers. Public sector is now slowing trying to exit areas where it is not competitive. Air India is a very good example. Air India was not able to take on competition because of overstaffing, inefficiency, and mounting debt burden. Public sector entered the hotel industry when private sector was not forthcoming in an era of controls. Today, the private sector has done better in this sector. Now, the government had decided to reduce its stake in many areas, including banking. Number one, reduction in the number of industries reserved for the public sector. In 1956, 17 industries were reserved for public sector, but now only industries like atomic energy, railway operations are reserved exclusively for public sector. That is, the private sector could enter all other areas and compete with the public sector. Many areas where the public sector had a monopoly, for example, telecom sector, the consumers have benefited by more choices, lower prices, and better quality of services. Number two, the second point regarding the government policy towards the public sector since 1991 pertains to disinvestment of shares of public sector enterprises. Disinvestment means the sale of the equity shares of public sector companies to the private sector and the public. This investment allows the new influx of capital. As the government gets fund from this investment, it can utilize the same for spending on social programs and causes such as basic health, family welfare, and primary education, etc. This investment also transfers the commercial risk to the private sector. Privatization of public sector companies frees these enterprises from government control. Number third, restructuring or closure of sick public sector units. If the public sector was making losses continuously, it was referred to the Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction for complete overhauling or shutdown. The government is now trying to go for outright sale of the sick unit if the attempts to revive failed. The government has already sold the Air India to Tata to save taxpayers' money in bailing it out year after year. Here we have read a few lines about BIFR. Let us have some more knowledge about BIFR. The Board for Industrial and Financial Reconstruction was set up in January 1987 to determine the sickness of industrial companies and to assist in reviving those that may be viable and shutting down the others. On December 1st, 2016, the Narendra Modi government dissolved BIFR and referred all the proceedings to the National Company Law Tribunal and National Company Law Appellate Tribunal. Fourth, Memorandum of Understanding. Under this system, the management of the particular public sector unit and the administrative ministry signs an MOU by which management is granted greater autonomy, but they are to achieve specific targets. If the targets are met, the company would continue, otherwise it would be shut down or disinvested. The role of public sector has been redefined. It has to compete in the market with other private sector companies in the same industry. Public sector continues to play an important role in the development of the economy since they offer products and services that benefit the whole population. Funding of public sector. Different governments from around the world employ their own unique methods to fund the public sector, such as taxes, fees, and financial transfers from other levels of government, for example, from federal to provincial or state government. Sometimes the public sector will partner with an organization in the private sector to create a public-private partnership. These hybrid organizations work together to jointly provide services to the public. Through the process of outsourcing, the public sector organizations will often engage private enterprises to deliver goods and services to their citizens. Now, we will discuss the various challenges which are faced by the public sector. Number one, budget cuts. Many public sector organizations have been subject to budget cuts in the recent years, which has adversely affected the quality of services provided by them. Number two, privatization. The privatization of public services has led to a decrease in the size of public sector and increase in the number of private sector organizations. Third, political interference. Political interference in the working of public sector organizations often results into decisions which are not in the best interest of the public. Overstaffing. Public sector suffers from the problem of excess staff. Fifth, trade unionism. Many a times, trade unions have also adversely affected the proper functioning of public sector entities. Sixth, lack of accountability. Mostly public sector officials are not held accountable for their lapses. Seventh, inappropriate pricing policy. Pricing policy of public sector is mostly inappropriate as their motive is social welfare and not profit earning.
Now, there are three topics before us. First is some misconceptions about public sector. Second is how to improve public sector. And the third pertains to the difference between private sector and public sector. Now we come to the first topic, some misconceptions about public sector. First misconception is that public sector is inefficient. This is not always the case. In many cases, public sector is more efficient than the private sector. Second misconception is that workers in the public sector are lazy and corrupt. Though there are some instances of corruption within the public sector, this is not unique to the public sector. And this problem of corruption exists in both the private and public sectors. We must remember that countless public workers spend long hours at their jobs when most of us are enjoying the comfort of being at home, especially during festivals. For example, firefighters, police officers, hospital workers, etc. Third misconception about public sector is that there are large number of government workers. Some say that government aggressively expands its workforce at the expense of taxpayers, which is not true. In fact, the number of government employees has almost remained static during the past decade or decreasing in some government departments. When we talk about the appropriate number of employees, we must think at the same time what level of service as taxpayers we expect from the government. When there is storm or and the electricity goes off, do we expect electricity to be restored quickly? If the house is on fire, do we want a few fresh employees or a large number of trained firefighters showing up at the site? Do we want quick service, 3-minute response time? Whether we need police assistance for firefighter or doctor, we always want that someone should always be there to answer our call. How can the public sector be improved? We often read articles in many newspapers regarding the poor performance of the public sector. Public money is not properly utilized or even misused. Government institutions do not coordinate with each other. All this is resulting into poor public services. There are a number of ways in which the public sector can be improved. First, increasing transparency and accountability. It can lead to reducing corruption within the public sector. The employees need a clear view on current performance, problems, as well as future goals. Second step which can be taken to improve public sector is investing in training and development. This step will ensure that the public sector employees have this and knowledge necessary to provide high quality services. Third step is use of technology. There is need to provide latest technological tools to government employees so that they can provide fast and efficient services. Fourth point is powerful feedback system. There is need to create a powerful feedback system through which citizens can provide information to their leaders about the quality and availability of public services in real time. One solution does not fit all. Different solutions may be appropriate for different countries and states. Public sector can be improved only if the government keep trying to improve and keep learning from the pitfalls and adapting their approach to achieve the desired changes. Now, we will differentiate between the private sector and public sector. First point of difference is ownership. In the case of private sector, the companies, enterprises, or the businesses are owned and managed by private individuals and private entities. But in the case of public sector consists of various organizations which are owned and managed by the government. Public sector organizations may either be partly or wholly owned by the central or state government or government bodies. Second point of difference is primary purpose. Private sector activities are guided by the motive to earn profits, whereas in the case of public sector, generally the purpose of public sector companies provide the basic public services to the common public at a reasonable cost in their respective industries. Profitability not the primary purpose of the public sector. Third point of difference is social objectives. Social objectives are not very important in the case of private sector, whereas in the case of public sector is guided by the social objectives like development of backward regions, creation of employment, equal distribution of wealth. Now the fourth point of difference is forms of organization. In the case of private sector, the various forms of organizations are sole proprietorship, partnership, joint Hindu family, cooperative societies, and company. Whereas in the case of public sector, the forms public enterprises are departmental undertakings, statutory corporations, and government companies. Fifth point of difference is profitability. Companies in the private sector are relatively more profitable than their counterparts in the public sector same industry. In the case of public sector, the companies are relatively less profitable. In the case of private sector, it is very easy to remove or reassign employees. There is no age for the retirement of employees in the case of private sector. Whereas in the case of public sector, it is difficult to remove or reassign employees. There is a fixed age of retirement in the case of public sector employees. Seventh point of difference is work culture for employees. In the case of private sector, competitive work culture with performance based career growth is there. There are good salary packages, incentives, etc. In the case of public sector, relatively relaxed work culture is there and retirement benefits are there. In the case of private sector, merit is the basis of promotion. But in the case of public sector, mostly seniority is the basis of promotion. In the case of private sector, it is decision making is most likely to be efficient because of quick decision making. Whereas in the case of public sector, efficiency less as decision making is not fast. There is red tapeism and bureaucratic control. In the case of private sector, capital comes from its owners or through loans and public issues. Whereas in the case of public sector, capital comes from the government funds and sometimes through public issues. Area of operation is Another point of difference. In the case of private sector operates in multiple industries such as IT, banking, financial services, transport, pharmaceutical, real estate, construction, manufacturing, mining, telecommunication, courier, etc. Public sector mostly operates in basic and public utility sectors such as police, army, health, water, etc. In the case of private sector, government interference is relatively less. But in the case of public sector, as these companies are owned by the government, so the public sector companies are subject to government interference. The examples of private sector companies are Tata Steel, Reliance Industries, HDFC Bank. The case of public sector, the examples in case of India are Indian Oil Corporation, Bharat Petroleum Corporation, State Bank of India. Conclusion: there is no doubt that both public and private sector are equally critical to the economic growth of any country. Despite many differences, there are certain industries wherein it makes sense for the government to take ownership and manage the same. Examples of such industries are defense sector, which is very sensitive as it handles many things about national security. On the other hand, one cannot deny the importance of private sector in the overall economy of any country. As of late, the private sector has been participating in almost all businesses or industries. Nowadays, private sector is progressing faster. Private sector has its own problems. There is reservation for minority section, females, a person with a disability, and much more. Sometimes talent stands completely ignored in the public sector. In the case of public sector, many facilities are given to employees and their job is secured. However, in the private sector, job is never secured. Can be fired anytime just because of a single mistake. Job performance is of paramount importance in the private sector. The workload is on the very high side, but all this is missing in public sector. In case of public sector, sometimes you have to pay money to the government officers for a simple work. It is an unending debate which is better. Both the sectors are good at their places. If the drawbacks are removed, they will surely prove good for the economy. Some argue that public sector means efficiency. However, there are some others who say that there is necessity of public sector for provision of certain services such as national defense, public works, utilities, and pollution control. If you like our video, please like, share and subscribe our channel. Thank you.